What are you trying to get attention wearing that Brooke Hall didn't whisper it? She wanted everyone in earshot to hear. Her voice cut through the morning chatter like a knife. A few others laughed, some nervously. Jason Reed started marching in place behind the girl like he was in basic training. Left, right, left. Uh-oh. Incoming. Emma Carter didn't say a word. She just kept walking. Combat boots thudding softly on the pavement. Oversized army jacket hanging on her small frame. Eyes forward, mouth shut. What no one at Lincoln High knew, not Brooke, not Jason, not the hundreds of students who stared and whispered, was that in just 28 minutes, a Black Hawk military helicopter would descend from the sky and land right on their football field. And that same girl in the camouflage jacket would change everything. If you've ever been judged for being different or judged someone before knowing their story, this one's for you. Tap, like if you feel it already, and hit subscribe to see how this unfolds. Because this was only the first minute. You ever see someone walk through a crowd like they're trying not to exist? That was Emma Carter that morning. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't break pace even as the stairs piled on like bricks on her shoulders. That camouflage jacket, it didn't fit her right. The sleeves were too long, the fabric worn thin, and the faintest scent of cologne still clung to the collar, the kind of scent that doesn't come in a bottle anymore. She had worn it once before 2 years ago, then never again. Not until today. Today wasn't just another awkward high school morning. Today was October 15th, and Emma Carter only wore that jacket one day a year, the day her father died. Some people wear grief in silence. Others carry it on their shoulders hoping the weight means something. You're going to want to stay with this story, because what Emma's carrying is just beginning to unfold. The last morning she saw her father, she was brushing her teeth. He knocked lightly on the bathroom door, not because he needed anything, but just to say goodbye one more time. "You good, Em?" She nodded with a mouthful of toothpaste, waved him off like he was annoying her. She thought he'd be back in a few weeks. She thought she'd have another chance to say a proper goodbye. But soldiers don't always come home on schedule. His bag was already in the truck, his boots already dusted, and when the front door clicked shut, that was it. Emma didn't wear that jacket for 2 years after that. She couldn't. Not until today, October 15th, and not because she wanted to remember the day he died, but because it was the only thing she had left that still smelled like him. Sometimes grief isn't loud. It doesn't scream or break things. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your locker at school. She didn't need to check her phone to know. Photos were already being posted. Snaps, captions, tags, the girl in the army jacket, the weird transfer student, the one who thinks dressing like a soldier makes her special. Emma could feel the words before they were even typed. It's a strange thing, how cruelty doesn't always come as a scream. Sometimes it's just 100 sideways glances all landing at once. She didn't fight them, didn't hide, didn't try to explain. She just walked, past the lockers, past the rows of backpacks and headphones and shallow conversations. Jason Reed was leaning against the wall chewing gum, watching her with that half-smirk he always wore like armor. He elbowed one of his friends. "Bet she thinks she's on some secret mission or something." Then louder, "Better salute, boys. We got a real war hero over here." Laughter. Phones out. Click. Emma didn't blink. She just kept walking. Sometimes silence is strength, but sometimes it's survival. Her locker was blue. Number 218. Middle row. Middle hallway. Right where everyone passed between first and second period. The worst possible place to be invisible. She stopped when she saw it. A piece of notebook paper torn at the edge taped right in the center of the door. Thick black marker scrawled in ugly, messy letters. G.I. Jane wants attention. It wasn't clever. It wasn't even original. But it landed. It always lands harder when you know they're not wrong about your pain, just wrong about the reason you wear it. Emma didn't cry. She peeled the note off with steady fingers, folded it once, and shoved it in her backpack. Her hands were shaking, but no one would ever know that. And then she did what grief teaches you to do best. She turned the combination lock, opened the door, and kept going. Most people think bravery looks loud, but sometimes it's just showing up again when they want you to disappear. Chemistry used to be her favorite, not because she loved the subject, but because it made sense. Equations had rules. Reactions followed patterns. It was the only class where nothing felt out of control. But the second Emma stepped through the door, she felt it. A ripple in the air like the whole room had already heard the joke and she was the punchline walking in. Some kids just glanced up and looked away. Others didn't even pretend. Phones shifted subtly under desks. Shoulders bumped quietly in mock salutes. Emma slid into her seat at the back, same as always, and pulled her notebook out like muscle memory. Mrs. Patel was already writing on the whiteboard molecules and covalent bonds spilling across the surface like order in a chaotic world. For a second, just one, Emma let herself breathe. Maybe this class would be quiet. Maybe this would still be her place. But even safety can vanish when the wrong people notice you. Tyler Monroe was the kind of guy teachers thought was funny and classmates thought was harmless. But Emma knew better. She could feel him watching her from 2 rows up, not in curiosity, but calculation. The kind of stillness predators have right before they move. Mrs. Patel turned to explain molecular polarity. Markers squeaked across the board. No one was really listening. That's when Tyler stood up suddenly. "Need to sharpen my pencil," he announced too loud. Mrs. Patel nodded absently without turning around, but he didn't go straight to the sharpener. He took the long way, the way that passed directly behind Emma's desk. And just as he reached her, crash. Her notebook, textbook, pencil pouch all swept off her desk in a single theatrical swing of his arm. "Oops," he said with that innocent smile that always got him out of trouble. Laughter snuck out around the room. Soft at first, then louder, and just like that, chemistry wasn't safe anymore either. Emma didn't say anything. She just leaned down quietly, hands reaching for the scattered mess now lying across the floor. But Tyler wasn't done. He crouched beside her, voice low, so only she and just enough people around them could hear. "Careful, soldier," he whispered. "Don't want you calling in an airstrike on the chemistry lab." He made a quiet explosion sound with his mouth. Boom. A few kids giggled behind their hands. Emma's fingers brushed her pencil under the desk, but it rolled farther away like even the smallest things wanted to escape the spotlight. Her face flushed hot, not with anger, but with something worse. Humiliation. Her father's jacket, already too big, suddenly felt heavier, like it was crushing her spine instead of holding her upright. And still, she said nothing. She stood up, gathered what was left, and sat back down in silence. There are moments when you want to scream. But sometimes not screaming is the only power you have left. Lunch used to be forgettable. Background noise, plastic trays, lukewarm food. Friends talking too loud about things that didn't matter. But that day, every hallway Emma walked felt like it led into a spotlight. She grabbed a tray, avoided eye contact, took whatever food they handed her without really seeing it. The cafeteria wasn't loud anymore. It was watchful. She could feel it in the way people whispered just a second too late, the way shoulders turned slightly as she passed, the way even the lunch ladies paused. She found a table in the back near the exit. No one else sat there. Of course not. She unwrapped her sandwich slowly, eyes fixed on her tray, pretending not to notice the laughter from the other end of the room, pretending not to hear her name. Sometimes the cruelest thing isn't what people say. It's how loudly they don't sit beside you. She saw them coming before they even reached her table. Brooke Hall. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect everything. Flanked by 2 girls Emma didn't even know the names of. They didn't ask to sit. Brooke just slid into the chair across from her, smiling like she'd just dropped by to borrow a pen. "Hey, soldier girl," she said lightly. Emma, right. "We just wanted to check on you. You've been getting so much attention today." Emma didn't respond. She just unwrapped the second half of her sandwich. It tasted like paper. Brooke's voice lowered just enough to make it feel intimate, like they were 2 friends having a private talk. "Look, I know you're new, and maybe this is your way of expressing yourself or whatever, but honestly, it's kind of intense. People are saying you're trying too hard." One of the girls behind her chuckled, not even hiding it. Emma looked up finally. Not in anger, not even in defense, just tired curiosity. Trying too hard to what she asked quietly. Brooke leaned in her smile, razor sharp now. To matter. Some girls break bones. Others break the air around you so no one remembers how to breathe when you leave the room. Emma looked at her for a long time. Not with anger, not even pain, just stillness. The kind that makes people uncomfortable, because they know they didn't win. Brooke's smile faltered just barely. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Emma saw it. "You don't know me," Emma said quietly, "and I'm not here to be understood by people like you." Brooke blinked. She wasn't used to pushback that didn't come with yelling or tears, Just calm. Emma wiped her hands on a napkin, folded it carefully, set it down beside her untouched tray. This isn't for attention, she added, eyes steady. It's for someone who deserves to be remembered. Then she stood up, gathered her things, and walked away, not in defeat, but in peace. Brooke didn't follow. No one did. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the only one that says anything real. The hallway felt different after she left the cafeteria. Not quieter, just less sharp, like the air didn't sting as much. Emma walked slowly, hands still tucked into the sleeves of her father's jacket like they didn't quite belong to her that day. She passed the vending machines. A couple students glanced her way and looked back down. No words. Just the kind of silence that follows a conversation no one wants to finish. She didn't need to go anywhere in particular. She just needed to not be there anymore. And that's when she heard it. Faint at first, so low you might have thought it was a truck down the street, but it wasn't. It was deeper, heavier, like the ground was holding its breath. Emma stopped walking. The sound got louder, not fast, not frantic, steady, mechanical, coming closer. Grief comes in waves, but sometimes, so does something else, something that doesn't ask permission, something that makes the world stop. At first, no one really noticed. Kids were still scrolling, laughing, unlocking lockers, but Emma stood still. She could feel it now in her feet. A vibration. Not a loud one, but the kind that makes the windows hum like something big is coming before it's seen. Then, one locker slammed shut. A second later, a girl near the end of the hallway looked up. "Do you guys hear that?" Someone laughed nervously. Another kid peeked outside the window by the stairwell, and then it happened. The lights flickered. Just once. But it was enough. Enough to shift the mood, enough to turn heads, enough to pull everyone out of their routines, even the ones who thought they were too cool to care. Emma didn't move. She didn't need to. Her eyes were already looking up past the lockers, past the people, to the sky beyond the windows, because somehow she already knew. Sometimes the world doesn't announce its turning point. It just hums, louder, until no one can ignore it anymore. By the time the second-floor windows began to rattle, even the teachers were looking up from their desks. Something about the sound, it didn't belong to cars or weather or anything ordinary. It was deeper, mechanical, like thunder, but controlled. Jason Reed looked up from his phone. For the first time all day, he wasn't smiling. "Yo, is that a chopper?" he muttered. Then came the shadows. A pulse of darkness swept across the hallway floor as if a cloud had passed in front of the sun, but outside the sky was still clear. Students pushed toward the windows, drawn by the strange growing gravity of it. The ground was humming now. Lockers buzzed softly. Water bottles trembled on desks. And that's when someone screamed from the east stairwell, "Oh my God, look!" Dozens ran, phones in hand, voices climbing over each other in disbelief. But Emma? She just stood there. Eyes wide, hands still tucked in her sleeves, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to remember something. Something she had only heard about. There are sounds you never forget, even if you've only ever heard them once, from behind a folded flag. And then it appeared. The helicopter came in low rotors, slicing through the air like it was water. A Black Hawk. Not a drill, not a movie, not a rumor. The real thing. Its olive green body carved a shadow over the entire school courtyard. Glass rattled harder. Loose papers shot across tables. Teachers yelled, but no one heard them. Phones were out. Kids pushed past each other at the windows, breathless. Is that for us? Is this like a stunt? What is happening right now? But Emma didn't move. She stood in the middle of the hallway, hair whipping slightly from the suction of air now crawling in through the stairwells. She watched as the helicopter circled the building, once precise, measured, heavy. Her classmates were frozen in adrenaline. She was frozen in something else. Recognition. Some people see a machine. Some see a spectacle. But for Emma, it was the sound of a goodbye that never had a chance to finish. The Black Hawk hovered once above the football field, its blades roaring so loud they drowned out thought. Then slowly it descended. The grass flattened. Dust swirled in violent spirals. The goalposts shook. Inside the school, it felt like time had been split open. Students had abandoned classrooms. Teachers stopped pretending to control anything. Even the skeptical ones, the ones who always rolled their eyes, were standing in doorways, eyes wide. And then the intercom crackled to life. It wasn't the usual morning voice. Not cheerful, not scripted. Principal Whitaker spoke like a man unsure of what to say, but knowing he had to say it anyway. Emma Carter, please report to the main office. Pause. Emma Carter, to the main office. Immediately. The hallway went still. Not just quiet, but hollow. Every eye turned. Every breath caught. Emma didn't move right away, because in that second she wasn't 17 years old anymore. She was a daughter remembering the day a knock came on her front door. There are names that echo differently when spoken out loud. Names that carry weight. Names that come with folded flags and unfinished stories. Emma didn't rush. She stood for one more breath, just one, then turned toward the front office. And the hallway parted. No one told it to. It just did. The same kids who laughed that morning, who whispered, who shared photos with captions they'd now pretend they never typed, they moved aside like a tide being pulled back. She walked between them. Not like a soldier, not like a victim. Just Emma. The soles of her combat boots tapped against the floor, rhythmic, grounded. The sound echoed through the corridor like punctuation. No one dared say her name now. Not with a smirk, not with a shrug, not with anything but wonder. Jason stood by his locker, frozen, his phone still in his hand, screen dark. Brooke watched from the end of the hallway. Her perfect posture looked a little smaller now, like she'd realized too late that silence doesn't protect you from shame. And Emma. She didn't look at any of them. Her eyes stayed forward. Sometimes power doesn't come from speaking louder. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly who you are, and walking through a world that tried to forget. The office was empty when she passed it. Principal Whitaker stood outside the front entrance, instead holding the door open like he didn't quite believe this was happening either. He didn't say anything when Emma walked past him. He just gave her a small nod, the kind you give someone who's about to do something that matters. Then she stepped outside, and the noise hit her like wind. The rotors were still spinning, kicking up gusts of air and dust and memory, but the Black Hawk had landed solid like it had always known exactly where to be. She blinked hard, because now, she wasn't just seeing a helicopter, she was seeing uniforms. People stepping down from the aircraft in formal dress blues, each one polished, precise, still. And leading them, tall, silver hair beneath a military cap, was Colonel Grace Langston. Emma knew that face. Because 3 years ago, that was the woman who stood in her living room and handed her mother a folded flag. Grief has a sound, but so does recognition. And sometimes they arrive in the same breath. The steps from the front door to the football field had never felt so long, and yet Emma didn't hesitate. The wind from the still-turning rotors whipped her hair around her face. She didn't fix it. She just kept walking. Colonel Langston stood at the 50-yard line, hands folded, expression unreadable but respectful, the kind reserved for someone who's seen too much to speak easily. Behind Emma, the school spilled outward. Teachers, students, hundreds of them. No bells had rung. No announcement had told them to gather, but somehow they all came. Not in neat lines, not in rows, just bodies in motion following a story they hadn't realized they were a part of. Brooke stood near the bleachers, her arms crossed over her chest, not defiant, now just unsure where to put her hands. Jason walked slower than the others, his face pale, his jokes long gone. And Emma. She kept her eyes forward, not because she was trying to be brave, but because that's what you do when the moment is bigger than you. Some people walk toward applause. Some walk toward ceremony. But Emma Carter walked toward something else entirely, truth. Colonel Langston stepped forward. Her boots were clean. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried. A staff sergeant behind her adjusted the small portable speaker. Static crackled once. Then, good morning. Students and faculty of Lincoln High. Everyone stood. No one moved. Even the wind quieted. 3 years ago, today, Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter gave his life during a rescue operation in Ghazni Province, Afghanistan. The words dropped like stones into the silence. No filter, no euphemisms, just truth. His convoy was hit. Communications were down. And while others took cover, Daniel moved toward the signal tower. Emma didn't flinch. She'd heard this story before in a folded flag and the unread texts on his old phone in the dreams that never really stopped. But now the story had witnesses. Because of his decision, 12 soldiers made it out alive. A ripple moved through the students. Some looked down. Others blinked hard. No one laughed. We don't always know the people we sit next to. We don't always ask. But sometimes, standing in a field of our own assumptions, we learn who they are too late to take back what we said. Colonel Langston paused. Her gaze drifted across the crowd, teenagers with backpacks, teachers, and cardigans, cafeteria staff still holding trays. Then, she turned toward Emma, and everything narrowed. There is someone here today who knows that story better than anyone. Her voice didn't rise. It lowered like she was inviting the whole school to lean in. Every year, on this date, she wears his uniform. Not for attention. Not for sympathy. She stepped to the side, not away from the mic, but out of its shadow so Emma could be seen fully clearly. She wears it to remember the sound of his voice, the weight of his courage, the kind of love that doesn't leave when the body does. Emma stood still, hands at her sides, dog tags around her neck, silent but loud now in meaning. Emma Carter, daughter of Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter, has honored her father with more dignity than most adults twice her age. There was no applause, not yet, just breath held tightly. And then something happened that hadn't happened all morning. A sound from the crowd. A single clap, hesitant, unsure, but then another. And another. Not celebration, recognition. Colonel Langston turned toward her aide. He stepped forward, holding a dark wooden case, simple but polished. The kind you don't open quickly. The colonel took it carefully, rested it on a small table beside the microphone, and opened the lid. Inside, folded with exact precision, was a flag. Stars and stripes tight against each other, creased not by storage but by ceremony. Next to it, a smaller, velvet-lined box. The colonel's voice softened. This flag flew above the forward operating base the week Staff Sergeant Carter died. She picked it up both hands. No rush. It was lowered to half-mast in his name, and has waited ever since to be placed in the hands of his family. The weight of it Emma could feel before she even touched it. Not just the fabric, but the days it had witnessed, the men and women who had saluted as it came down. Colonel Langston turned toward her not as an officer to a student, but as a soldier to a soldier's child. She extended the flag. Emma stepped forward. Her arms didn't shake, but her breath did. She took it, and for the first time all day, her eyes dropped. Not in shame, but in reverence. Some honors are too large for a stage, but when placed in the right hands they don't need spotlights. They speak for themselves. Colonel Langston glanced at the second box. It was smaller, lined in deep navy velvet, and when she opened it, the sun caught metal, a glint almost too bright to look at directly. The Medal of Honor, she said simply, not loudly. She didn't need to. You could feel the crowd react not with gasps but with a breath that seemed to stop mid-air. It was awarded posthumously to Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter for actions that saved 12 soldiers at the cost of his own life. There were no details, not today, only the essentials, which in moments like this are more than enough. Emma stared at it. She didn't reach for it, not yet. Colonel Langston continued, her voice steady but not practiced. This wasn't a speech. It was a eulogy, 3 years late. For years, Emma has carried this memory alone, with no ceremonies, no recognition, only a jacket, a pair of boots, and the kind of silence only children of war know. Emma blinked, but the tears didn't fall. They stayed right behind her eyes like soldiers standing at attention. Some honors are pinned. Some are inherited. And now, in the middle of a high school football field surrounded by teenagers who once laughed, Emma Carter was seen. Not as the girl in camouflage, not as the misfit, but as a daughter of a hero and someone who had become something brave in her own right. Colonel Langston took one small step forward. The mic was turned off now. No audience, just 2 people on the field. She leaned in, voice low, just for Emma. He'd be proud of the woman you've become. His courage lives on in you. And today, everyone saw it. Emma's lip trembled, not from sadness, but from the sudden ache of recognition, because for years no one had said that. No teacher, no friend, not even her mother who grieved in silence and wine bottles. Emma nodded just once. It wasn't acceptance. It was release. Behind them, the school remained still. Even the wind had stopped as if giving the moment space. The colonel stepped back. Emma's hands, one holding the flag, the other resting gently on the metal, were no longer shaking. The uniform no longer looked oversized. It fit now, not in size, but in meaning. Because sometimes what makes a hero's legacy visible isn't a helicopter or a headline. It's the way someone like Emma keeps showing up, keeps walking those halls, keeps wearing the weight, not to prove anything, but to remember everything. The field was still quiet. No music, no school bell, Just breath and wind and the weight of realization settling on 2,000 people. Then a single pair of hands clapped. Soft, slow, then another, and another, not polite, not forced. It built, not upward, but inward. A round of applause that felt more like a confession. We didn't know. We judged too quickly. We're sorry. Emma didn't look up at first, but when she did, she saw it. Not their faces, but their eyes. Different now, not watching, witnessing. At the edge of the field, Ms. Dobson, her history teacher, stood frozen, hand over heart. Near the bleachers, Jake Lynn, who once laughed in the hallway, looked like he might cry. Even the assistant principal had tears on his collar. This wasn't a school anymore. It was a moment, one that would outlive every student in it. Emma stepped back from the colonel, still holding the flag, still wearing the boots, but now she wasn't carrying it alone. The applause continued not louder, but longer, and in the space between every clap was something sacred, a girl, a daughter, a memory now fully seen. Emma turned slowly, not to the crowd, but toward the path back to the building. She could have stayed longer, let them clap, let the moment last, but she didn't. Because for her, this wasn't about attention. It never was. She walked with the flag folded in her arms, the Medal of Honor still pinned to the chest of her father's jacket, now hers in every way that mattered. And something strange happened. As she stepped past the colonel, past the field, past the first row of students, the crowd parted. Not just physically, emotionally. Phones lowered, voices quieted. Even the ones who had laughed at her looked away, not in shame, but in reverence. Madison Torres. Lip gloss gone. Confidence shaken, took a single step out of the crowd. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. Just placed a hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. It wasn't performative. It was real. Emma gave a soft nod. No words passed between them, but the silence said everything. Back on the walkway, each step Emma took echoed louder than 1,000 cheers. Not because of sound, but because every step was now witnessed. She was no longer invisible, no longer misunderstood. She was exactly who she had always been, but now, finally, the world had caught up. The double doors swung open as Emma stepped back inside. Same hallway, same lockers, same tile floors. But everything felt different now, like the building itself had held its breath waiting for her to return. She wasn't escorted. She didn't need to be. Her steps were steady, her chin level, but the tension in the air, you could taste it. The corridor was packed, but no one moved to block her path. Even the seniors, the ones too cool to care, stood quietly. Some watched, some lowered their eyes. A few nodded small solemn acknowledgments of what they'd witnessed. Emma passed the bulletin board where her photo had been taped 2 weeks ago with the words, G.I. Jane is. Having a crisis. It was gone now. Ripped down sometime between the field and this walk. But in its place was something else, a single sticky note hastily scribbled. Sorry. No name, just the word. And beside it, a small, folded American flag pin taped gently to the corner. Emma paused just a second, enough to breathe it in, then kept walking. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need applause. She just needed the world to know, and now it did. Emma reached her classroom door just as the bell rang. But for once, no one rushed past her. No one shoved or muttered or stared. Even the kids who usually filled the halls with noise stood still like something sacred had passed through and left behind quiet. She pushed the door open. Same room, same teacher, same back row desk. But something had shifted. Mrs. Pollard, her literature teacher, looked up mid-sentence and froze. Just a flicker, a caught breath. Then she nodded. Slow, deep. We're just getting started, she said softly, as if welcoming someone home after a long journey. Emma walked to her desk. Tyler, the kid who once mimicked bombs dropping, had already cleared the seat beside hers. No jokes today, just space. A girl near the window, one Emma didn't even know by name, reached into her backpack, then quietly slid a protein bar across Emma's desk. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. As class resumed, the usual hum of distraction was gone. Eyes were forward. Phones were away. But every now and then, someone would glance at Emma, not curious, not pitying, just aware, respectful, like they'd seen her in a way that couldn't be unseen. At lunch, no one sat at the popular table, not because they were boycotting, but because no one wanted to be seen as louder than the truth. Instead, students scattered, Small clusters, quiet conversations, and in every group someone brought her up. Not to mock, to ask, to reflect. Did you see the way she held that flag that was her dad's name? Right on the medal. She wears it every year, and no one noticed. Even teachers were changed. Coach Reynolds, who once told Emma to lighten up when she skipped Spirit Week, sat with the science faculty in the lounge replaying the colonel's speech on his phone for the third time. I had no idea, he whispered. The librarian printed out a photo from the ceremony and pinned it to the bulletin board with a handwritten caption, "Heroism doesn't always wear a smile. Sometimes it wears boots and walks alone." But perhaps the most unexpected moment came when Principal Hart, a man known for his stiff demeanor, took the mic during afternoon announcements. His voice cracked halfway through. We often say we're a community, but today Emma didn't just remind us of service or sacrifice. She reminded us of humanity. And for the first time all semester, no one packed their bags before the bell. That evening the field was empty. The Black Hawk was gone. The cameras were off. Even the wind had quieted as if giving her this moment. Emma sat alone on the bleachers, her father's flag folded beside her, his medal resting in her hands. Above her, the sky had begun to blush orange, melting into purple, a quiet reminder that endings are just another kind of beginning. She didn't cry. Not this time. Not because it didn't hurt, but because for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not for the uniform, not for the drama, but for the girl who showed up day after day wearing her grief like armor and love like truth. In her lap, she unfolded the note Madison had slipped into her locker after last period. Just 4 words I didn't know. I'm sorry. No excuses, no deflection, and that was enough. Emma looked out at the field, the same 50-yard line where the rotor blades had once kicked up dust, where her father's story was finally heard. She could still feel him there. Not in the noise, but in the quiet that came after. And maybe that's what legacy really is. Not something loud, but something that stays. She stood, brushed off her uniform, and picked up the folded flag. The lights in the school began to flicker on one hallway at a time. Somewhere a janitor's mop hit tile. Somewhere a piano played softly from the music room. And Emma walked home not with the weight of memory, but with the grace of meaning. If this story moved you, take a second to honor the quiet heroes in your own life. Share your thoughts in the comments, like if it hit your heart, and subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be told. This wasn't just Emma's story. It might be someone you know,